Well, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas in my craft room right now. You know that holiday season is going to be here before you know it. So today I want to share two adorable little Snowman Pop Up slider cards with you. Now these are probably the easiest slider cards that you will ever make. Why? Well, I'm glad you asked. These slider cards were created with the partial die cutting technique. Hi, it's Lynn Dunn from Stamptastic Designs. Thanks so much for joining me today. In this episode of Stamptastic TV, you will learn how to use the partial die cutting technique to make a pop-up slider card. Now, it's one of the quickest and easiest ways to create a slider card. The cards featured in this video showcase some fun new products that are coming out in the 2019 Stampin Up Holiday catalog. But keep in mind that you can use any stamp set or any pattern papers you have on hand to create this card. Just get creative with it. For the latest card making ideas, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click on that little bell so you will be notified each time I upload a new video. Now, I find myself working on Christmas cards off and on throughout the year. However, I usually get super excited about Christmas card making right around the end of August. So when do you start making Christmas cards? Leave me a comment below. Okay, so first let's talk about the supplies that you will need to create these cards. Now, I highly recommend using mostly white cardstock. However, you can accent your card with other colors that coordinate with your pattern papers. I will also be using some of the fun new paper patterns from the Let It Snow Designer Series paper pack, as well as a new stamp set called Snowman Season. I will also be using some Memento Black and some Real Red ink. Now, to create the slider card that I'm sharing with you today, I will be featuring a partial die cutting technique using one of the stitched rectangle dies. Now, you can certainly use your paper trimmer to create the rectangular shape, but it's definitely not a quick and easy process. You will be amazed at how quickly you can create this slider card when you use the rectangular die. I will also be using a small stitched circle shape to create the focal point on one of the cards. You will also need a bit of ribbon to tie onto the slider portion of the card so that you can make the card interactive. So I am using some of the Real Red curly ribbon. This is new ribbon that's coming out in the holiday catalog. I'm also going to showcase a fun new product. Well, actually, it's a returning favorite of mine, and it's called Crystal Effects, so I'll show you how to use that. And the last thing I recommend is using some type of multi-purpose liquid glue. It will make it a lot easier to adhere all of the pieces together. All right, that's it. I think we're ready to get started. Okay, so let's start by creating the base and the pop-up slider section for this card. So the base of the card is simply a 5.5 by 4.25 inch piece of white cardstock. Now, I recommend using white so that you can do some stamping underneath the slider portion of the card. Next, you're going to cut a 5.5 by 4 inch piece of your favorite pattern paper. So just a little tip for you, you can certainly cut this piece at the exact same size of the card base, which is 5.5 by 4.25 inches. However, I recommend cutting it at 4 inches instead of 4.25. First, it will leave a nice little mat around the sides of the card. And the other reason is that it saves a bit of paper. So it allows you to cut 6 pieces of pattern paper from a 12 by 12 inch sheet. Okay, now that we have the pattern paper cut, it's time to create the slider section. So this is where the partial die cutting technique comes in. So grab the stitched rectangle die that measures approximately 2 3/4 by 4 inches. Now grab your embossing machine and create the sandwich that you need to use with the dies. Now I'm using the Big Shot embossing machine, so I have my standard platform, the thin die adapter, and one of my cutting plates. Next, place your pattern paper on that first cutting plate. Now lay the rectangular die in the center of the pattern paper. Now carefully place the second cutting plate on top of the die so that everything is covered except for that one end of the rectangular die. The die will only cut the sections that are under the cutting plate. So any section that is exposed will not be cut. That's why it's important to leave that one end section exposed. Now run the die through your embossing machine. Carefully remove the die from the pattern paper. Now notice that the top part of the rectangular shape is not cut. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. Now we're ready to score this rectangular section to create the pop-up. Place the pattern paper in your paper trimmer. Using the scoring tool, create a score line across the top section of the rectangle to create a fold. Now this is the section that is still intact on the paper, the section that we did not cut with the die. Next, create a score line in the center of the rectangular piece. Now I simply eyeballed it because the center of the rectangular piece may be a little different depending on where you laid the rectangular die when we did the partial die cutting technique. Okay, the last score line we need to create is on the end of the rectangular shape. The score line needs to be approximately 1/4 inch. Now I find it easier to turn my pattern paper around to create this score line. Again, I simply eyeball the placement of this score line. It does not have to be perfect, so please don't get stressed out about positioning these exactly. Now fold on all of the score lines to create a little tent. It's almost like an easel card, except there's a 1/4 inch score line on the pattern paper that we will be using to adhere this piece to the slider section. Okay, so before we adhere this pattern paper to the card base, we need to create the slider. Cut a 2 3/4 by 4 3/4 inch piece of white cardstock. Next, take the white cardstock and slide it behind the rectangular shape on your pattern paper until it meets up with the bottom of the rectangular opening. Now, I recommend folding the rectangular section backwards so you can see where to place the white slider. Now be sure to keep the end of that white cardstock piece flush with the bottom of the rectangular opening. You will be adhering that little 1/4 inch section of the rectangle on your pattern paper to the end of the white cardstock, to the end of that slider piece. So it's important to note that that white cardstock is cut slightly larger than that rectangular opening. This will help keep the slider in place once we adhere everything to the card base. Now to adhere the slider, add a little bit of liquid glue to the 1/4 inch scored section on the bottom of that rectangular piece. Lay the rectangular section flat and then adhere that 1/4 inch section to the bottom of the white slider piece. Okay, so while that is drying, let's put the rest of the card together. So flip over the pattern paper with the slider piece attached and add some liquid glue to the sides and bottom of the pattern paper. You want to make sure that you do not add any glue to the white slider piece or it's not going to slide. So be sure to add small amounts of liquid glue so that it doesn't ooze into that slider. Now go ahead and adhere the entire piece of pattern paper to your 5.5 by 4 1/4 inch piece of white cardstock. So that is your card base. Now the liquid glue will dry pretty quickly if you spread it on thin. Okay, let's reach inside the top part of the card and grab that little white slider piece. Now you will notice that when we pull on the slider, the rectangular shape pops up to create a little tent. Pretty cool, hey? Okay, now let's add a bit of ribbon to the top of the slider card to make it easier to open. That way we don't have to reach inside the card every time. So use a hole punch to create just a small hole in the top part of the slider. Thread a bit of ribbon through the hole and then tie it in a little knot and trim off the excess. Okay, now that we have the ribbon in there, we can push our slider back in and flatten out the card, and let's decorate it. So to decorate the card, I simply stamped a snowman image on a little stitched circle shape using some black ink. Add a bit of shading to the image using your markers or your favorite coloring tools. Now lay the card flat in front of you and adhere the bottom half of the circle to the rectangular pop-up section using a few dimensionals. Now open up the pop-up section by pulling on the ribbon. Once you have it opened, stamp a sentiment on the white cardstock that is exposed when you open up the pop-up section. So there you go. We have just created our pop-up slider card. Isn't it cute? Now, it's adorable just as it is, but I decided to add a bit of shimmery crystal effects to the snowman. It's a thick liquid that will harden and leave a fun shimmer and shine on your stamped images. So all you have to do is just open up the bottle and squeeze a little bit of Crystal Effects all over the stamped image, and then let it dry. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes for the Crystal Effects to dry, depending on how thick you put it on. This is one of the many new products that are coming out in the 2019 Stampin' Up Holiday catalog. And actually, the Crystal Effects is coming back. We used to have this several years ago, so I'm super excited that it's coming back. You're going to love it. So speaking of the new Stampin' Up Holiday catalog, it goes live on September 4th, 2019. Are you excited? If you would like your very own copy of the catalog, I'd be happy to send you one, so you can find the link to request one in the description below this video. Now, you can also create a totally different look simply by changing up the way you decorate your slider card. Now, this first card I just shared with you features a portrait style card with the slider moving up and down. Now, this second card idea features a landscape style card with a slider that moves left to right. So you basically have two different cards, but they were created with the exact same measurements. That means you don't have to change any of the dimensions on your slider card to create two totally different cards. How cool is that? Now, if you love card making and you want to get a jump start on your Christmas cards, then be sure to check out my new Christmas card making club, which is going to start up in September. We will be creating 12 cards each month. In the very first month, the month of September, I am featuring this stamp set called Snowman Seasons. So it's the stamp set that I used to create the cards I shared with you today. So you can find more information about the club simply by clicking on the link in the description below this video. Now you have a fun pop-up slider card idea that you can use with any stamp set or pattern papers you have on hand. Just get creative with it. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to download the printable tutorial. You can find the link below this video. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by liking it and sharing it with your friends. And leave a comment below to let me know what you enjoyed most about the video and the project shared here today. Have fun getting creative, take care, and I'll see you soon.